What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Kick-Ass Podcast. We are back here today to discuss the latest updates on the Janelle Grant Vince McMahon lawsuit. Of course, it's no news to anyone if you are watching a video like this. I'm sure you have heard of the allegations that have been brought against him. If this is your first time hearing it, which I doubt, but if for whatever reason it is, I would not watch this video as of yet. I would go back and do some research and just check out the allegations that are being made, because I'm not going to go over those here in this video in particular, for two reasons really. One, that is it's needs and deserves its own time, and that's not the focus here today because some more information has been revealed, so that's what we're going to go over here today. But secondly too, it deserves its own respect and its own detailed reporting, and I am not qualified myself to do that. Horrible again, what in just disgusting, and in any word you can think of, that times 10 in my opinion, in just the vile nature of what has been alleged. So again, that's why I'm not gonna kind of rehash that here as well. But there's plenty of videos out there. Like I said, if you haven't heard of the details that are more in depth and more suited to discuss that than I am. But today I just wanted to discuss solely the corporate officers that have been named, and I will be reading directly off of frontofficesports.com. It's a pretty lengthy article that they posted. I believe it was yesterday. Yes, yesterday evening, March 12th, 2024. Depending on when you're watching this, obviously, most likely not going to just be watching it today on March 13th. So, for specification purposes, the article was posted March 12th, 2024 at 6:05 p.m. by Tim Marchman, John Pollock, and Brandon Thurston. So shout out to frontofficesports.com and those three gentlemen themselves for the work that they put in with this. I do know that John Pollock and Brandon Thurston also appeared on, I believe it was either Long Crime Network or News Nation. I don't have it pulled up here. Oh, it was the Long Crime Network. And I believe that aired yesterday as well, so probably not too long after they posted the article on their site. So if you guys want to see Brandon Thurston and John Pollock talk about it directly, I believe it was with Ashley. I don't want to misspeak. I believe her name is Ashley. There's a couple different hosts that they have. But regardless, you guys can seek that out and hear from them directly regarding the article and the developments that have been made. But I wanted to just discuss it here and read the article word for word. So like I said, it is a little bit of a lengthy article. So I will try not to deviate too much and try to hold some comments. But you guys know me. Sometimes I can't bite my tongue, so I have to say whatever. But like I mentioned in the video that I did yesterday, I didn't want to, I don't say cram this in, but put this in with another video, especially with the length of the video that ended up being yesterday. Just because this deserves its own time and its own recognition and its own sensitivity. You know what I mean? And I just didn't feel comfortable going from this and then talking about, oh, Mercedes Monet is going to be debuting tomorrow night. You know what I mean? So again, if this isn't your cup of tea or anything like that, you feel free to skip this and wait for the next video and on to the next, or check out some other channels. But again, I just wanted to again shed some light on this and just read the article. I haven't read the entirety of the article, but I did begin reading it, and then I was like, well, let me just hold off and read it with everyone. So that being said, again, it's from frontofficesports.com, posted March 12th. It begins, and the title of the article itself is WWE President Nick Khan, COO Brad Bloom revealed as key figures in Vince McMahon's sex trafficking suit. And the page itself, there are two bullet points directly underneath that headline that do indicate neither Khan nor Bloom is alleged to have participated in or known about abuse of any kind. Also, central to the suit, former WWE exec Stephanie McMahon, who is described as knowing of other instances of her father engaging in, quote, inappropriate sexual conduct, end quote. The article does begin by stating WWE President Nick Khan and COO Brad Bloom are the men identified as corporate officers number one and number two in a sex trafficking lawsuit filed in January in federal court in Connecticut against the company, former chair Vince McMahon, and former talent relations executive John Laurinaitis. Excuse me, guys, I'm battling some allergies, so probably not the best time to be reading an article, so I apologize for that. But it continues. The suit claims that Khan and Bloom, whose names have not previously been reported, were instrumental to a scheme in which the plaintiff, a woman named Janel Grant, was employed, quote, in a completely unidentified role, except for the understanding that she remained a sexual slave to be used and trafficked by McMahon within the WWE, end quote. Unlike McMahon and Laurinaitis, the two are not personally accused of sexual misconduct or violence. Rather, the suit claims that they and others facilitated and covered up exploitation in ways that make WWE liable under federal anti-trafficking law. Khan, a deal maker and former CAA executive who earned a reputation as one of the most powerful men in sports media through negotiating billion-dollar deals for clients like the SEC and WWE before joining the latter as president in 2020, is now the top person in control of the sprawling empire it took McMahon a lifetime to build. He reports to TKO president Mark Shapiro and ultimately answers to legendary Hollywood power broker Ari Emanuel, who took over as chair of WWE's parent company, TKO, after McMahon resigned in January following the suit. WWE takes Miss Grant's allegations very seriously and has no tolerance for any physical abuse or unwanted physical contact. A WWE spokesperson said in a statement. Neither Nick Khan nor Brad Bloom, prior to the lawsuit being filed on January 25th, 2024, were aware of any allegation by Miss Grant that she was the victim of abuse or unwanted physical contact, nor does the complaint allege that either had knowledge of such, end quote. McMahon has said the allegations in the lawsuit are baseless and that he intends to vigorously defend himself. A lawyer for Laurinaitis has denied the allegations, but appeared to corroborate them by saying at the same time that, like Grant, his client was, quote, a victim in this case, not a predator, unquote. Which was very, and it was a very interesting set of words that he used. I remember thinking at the time, like, kind of gives you a indication on what route maybe that side is going to be taking. So this is depending on how far this gets, in my opinion, obviously I'm not going to sit here and act like I know anything about the law. I am just one of those people who watches YouTube videos and documentaries and shit. So I'm not the one to come to for any type of idea or like, oh yeah, Ashley thinks it's gonna go this way. So no, Ashley has opinions, and Ashley yeah, Ashley just has opinions, and that's pretty much it. I don't act like I know much about anything. I do seek out to learn more, and I think that's why I'm so fascinated with, like, I don't want to say true crime to just kind of tie this into that and put it in a disparaging light, but just the long crime side of it, and just again, like I always say, the why of things. I think that's what always just fascinates me the most. But yeah, so I don't look to me for any legal advice, guys, because I ain't the one. I need help too. You know what I mean? I need guidance too. But moving back to the article itself and getting back to the statements that were made, the article continues by saying the information about the identities of the corporate officers offers a new lens through which to view Grant's suit. Most attention has focused on the allegations of extreme sexual violence the suit makes against McMahon and his associates. It can, though, also be read as a set of claims about how McMahon made the highest ranking executives in his company complicit in his conduct. Front Office Sports independently identified Khan and Bloom, as well as the two other anonymous corporate officers to whom the suit refers, by cross checking the details of the suit against publicly available records like online resumes and corporate filings, as well as information provided by sources familiar with WWE. Corporate officer number one is said in the suit, for example, to have maintained a fourth floor office at the company's former headquarters, which a person who worked there confirmed was true of Nick Khan. FOS, which is for front office sports, then asked Grant's lawyer, Janel Grant's lawyer, Ann Callis, whether its reporting was accurate. Quote, I can confirm that these names are correct, end quote, she said, which is Ann Callis, again, the lawyer for Janel Grant. So she, therefore, is confirming front office sports findings of the identities of corporate officer number one and number two, which is pretty big. You know that's pretty big, and I'm sure she's second best at the bet. Confirming the true identities, and if that is in fact corporate officer number one, two, three, and four, she would know. You know what I mean? So again, not endorsing anything one way or another, because again, all of this is still allegations and still pending at this point. But shout out to front office sports and the three gentlemen who put the work into it. I'm sure they may have had others helping as well, but if it was just the three of them, shout out to them for all the work that they put into it and identifying this and just cross-checking everything. But moving back to the article, it says the suit says that McMahon groomed Grant while she was grieving the death of her parents and had her hired into a fake job with the company's legal department in May 2019. Subsequent to that, it says she was subjected to, quote, extreme cruelty and degradation, end quote, including McMahon defecating on her during group sex and he and Laurinaitis raping her in the WWE offices, with the abuse only ending in 2022. This left her, according to the suit, quote, crippled both physically and mentally, including from debilitating symptoms of post traumatic stress disorder and suicidal ideation, end quote. It's it just makes you feel so many different things, you know what I mean, guys? But continuing on, it says McMahon presented Bloom and Khan after his hiring Khan's in August 2020 to Grant as his key fixers, according to the suit. The first time McMahon met her, it says in March 2019, he promised Grant, who had minimal work history, that his office would reach out to arrange a meeting with Bloom, who was executive vice president in charge of operations at the time. A week later, the suit says she met with Bloom. He, quote, hardly asked any questions, unquote, and before long, she had been hired into a $75,000 a year job in the legal department. In February 2020, the suit says McMahon told Grant that Bloom had warned him, quote, there were a lot of rumors circulating, end quote, about the relationship. Immediately after this, she was transferred to another department. And I believe that department that she was transferred to was talent relations, which John Laurinaitis was the pretty much the runner of. But I'm not 100%, but I believe that's where she ended up being transferred to. It continues on saying, years later, the suit says, after McMahon and Grant signed a non-disclosure agreement he negotiated on WWE's behalf without its knowledge, he ended up only paying $1 million of an agreed upon $3 million. The two had a call. Oh, okay. He ended up only paying $1 million of the agreed upon $3 million. The two had a call he claimed would be the last conversation they would ever have, during which he named Bloom as one of the two people she should call if she ever needed anything. Which is just wild. Um, it continues, the two of those people I'm sorry. The second of those two people was Khan. According to the suit, in March 2021, Grant told McMahon that Khan had responded to her, introducing herself in a corridor by telling her he knew exactly who she was. Later that day, the suit says McMahon told her that he had held a meeting with Khan and Bloom and informed them of the nature of their relationship. McMahon told her, the suit says, that the two men had voiced concerns to him and, quote, inquired whether Grant can be trusted, end quote. And then they have in parentheses, a WWE spokesperson denies this conversation ever happened. McMahon, the suit says, told Grant that the two, quote, expressed concern but were ultimately supportive, end quote, of McMahon and Grant's relationship. The next day, the suit says Bloom told her that she was being transferred to the talent relations department. Okay, there we go. Where she would report to John Laurinaitis, with whom McMahon had months before pressured her into group sex at McMahon's condo. In parentheses, they have here, she was going for, the suit says, expected to sexually service Laurinaitis at his hotel and in his office. The suit alleges, and in parentheses there, continues, the suit alleges that her sexual exploitation continued for another year. It also says that during negotiations over the NDA, Grant included Khan and Bloom in a list of people whose roles should be addressed in the agreement due to their, quote, knowledge of the relationship, end quote, though the suggestion was rejected. The suit does not explicitly make any claims about whether Khan, Bloom, or the other two corporate officers knew of any alleged sexual acts of sexual violence, rather, or cruel and degrading treatment. So, pretty much saying that neither of the four corporate officers that were referenced knew anything about the actual nature of what was happening. Most likely, I'm assuming, and again, just making a pure assumption here, that they may have just known of a relationship, like a side affair. But I would imagine most likely not to the full extent of what exactly was happening behind closed doors. But again, we may learn more information. But that's just my assumption there, and I know it is dangerous to make assumptions, but that's kind of the vibe that I'm getting off of just kind of what we're reading here. And it does continue to say the person identified in the suit as corporate officer number 3 is, according to FOS, Front Office Sports, reporting that Grant's lawyer confirmed McMahon's daughter, longtime WWE executive Stephanie McMahon. She is mentioned once in an ambiguous context, uh, which makes me feel a little bit better. You know what I mean? That she wasn't heavily involved. But again, it's not really surprising why she stepped down. I would want to get as far away as possible as I could as well. But yeah, Grant, the suit says, attended meetings of WWE's executive committee, something far above her pay grade, and the appropriateness of which she asked Khan and Bloom about. At one of these meetings, the suit says Stephanie McMahon, who is described as knowing, quote, of other instances of Vince McMahon engaging in inappropriate sexual conduct, end quote, motioned Grant to sit near her. 3 months after the NDA between McMahon and Grant was signed in 2022, Stephanie McMahon, then WWE's chief brand officer, announced she was taking a leave of absence from the company. A month later, the Wall Street Journal reported on a probe by the WWE board of directors into payments made by Vince McMahon involving NDAs with several former female employees and performers. After his subsequent resignation as CEO and chair of the board, she became interim CEO and chair. In early 2023, her father seized control of the board ahead of WWE's eventual merger with the Ultimate Fighting Championship under the auspices of Ari Emanuel's Endeavor. She resigned days later. So, kind of just a quick timeline there of what happened with Stephanie and her brief promotion and then stepping down, which was not even that long ago, which it feels like forever ago, but it wasn't even that long ago. Excuse me, guys. Quick drink there. Excuse me, the article continues to say that Stephanie McMahon did not respond to questions sent via overnight letter to a postal box she is said to control and through a direct message to a social media account she controls. WWE declined to provide contact information for a lawyer or representative through which FOS could reach her. So no real surprise there. I probably wouldn't be jumping to respond either. Um, yeah, it's just something else, guys. And it's I'll save my comments for now. It continues, the person identified as corporate officer number 4, according to FOS reporting, which Grant's lawyers confirmed. Grant's lawyer confirmed, is Brian Nurse, formerly general counsel and head of WWE's legal department. According to the suit, on May 9th, 2019, 8 months after he'd been hired, he offered Grant a job 3 hours after having called her to, quote, discuss a legal role, end quote. The next day, the suit says Vince McMahon told her that he had ordered Nurse to offer Grant the job, and then McMahon sexually assaulted her for the first time and describing what he did to her. The suit describes the work environment in the legal department as distressing to the point where that Grant was openly experiencing panic attacks in the office. She was never onboarded, it says, or given any clear responsibilities, and Nurse was, quote, warm with other colleagues but cold with her, end quote, before becoming openly hostile, behavior his staff noticed, discussed with Grant, and in some cases emulated. Nurse, the suit says, would even stop and change directions if he saw her in a hallway, and he told at least one other executive that he knew or suspected the relationship between Grant and McMahon was sexual. In February 2020, Grant was transferred to another division. In November of 2020, Nurse was, the suit says, quote, terminated or asked to resign, end quote, making him one of a number of employees it claims were, quote, forced to resign or were let go if they knew of McMahon's exploits and failed to assist, support, and or facilitate them, end quote. So Vince was just reckless, it sounds like, and he didn't give a fuck. Continues, not long afterward, the suit says Grant was transferred back to the legal department before ultimately being transferred back to Laurinaitis' talent relations department because her presence in the legal department was, McMahon told her, making it difficult to hire a new top lawyer. It continues, the Nurse did not respond to a direct message sent to a social media account he controls or to a request for comment sent to his work email address. A spokesperson for his current employer did not respond to an email asking to be put in touch with him. WWE declined to comment on the terms on which he left the company. And the final paragraph here for the article says, under Khan, a childhood friend of new TKO board member Dwayne The Rock Johnson, WWE has achieved unprecedented business success. In January, WWE and Netflix announced a new 10-year, $5.2 billion deal to broadcast WWE programming around the globe, which will bring year-round live content to the streamer beginning in 2025. The wrestling company generated $1.326 billion in revenue last year. WWE, in combination with UFC under TKO Group Holdings, has a market capitalization of just under $14 billion as of the close of market on Friday. Next month, it will hold its 40th annual WrestleMania event in Philadelphia. So, guys, told you that was a lot. Thank you for sticking around. It is a lot of it is just it kind of leaves you speechless, and it kind of leaves you just sitting here not even really knowing what to say, because nothing you say can justify, or not justify, but can even come close to embodying what this woman allegedly went through. And again, still just saying allegedly because all of this is still pending, obviously. um I can't imagine being in a situation like that. So that's kind of why I didn't want to get into the specifics of the assaults that she allegedly again went through. But even just the brief information that they referenced here in the article, that's some of the most degrading of it all. You know what I mean? So it's just wild. Um, so I'm not going to really delve into that. My thoughts, though, regarding the four corporate officers being identified and one of them being Stephanie, like I mentioned earlier, it does make me feel a little bit better that, okay, we all kind of assume that Stephanie knew something at least was going on, possibly other people as well, that we don't want to like say it ain't so type of thing, you know what I mean? Um But if that truly is the level of involvement and awareness that she had, I'm sure if she I'm going to hope, because obviously I don't know her, but everything that we've heard from when she was in the business and leadership, no one really had anything bad to say, and especially when she was in recent years, you know what I mean? When she was promoted and when she was the leader and she was the chairwoman of the board, right? Co-chairwoman. She got so many different like tweets and praises on social media and posts and stuff. And that wasn't stuff that the wrestlers had to do. It wasn't one of those copy paste, like, oh, promote this or congratulate this or happy birthday, type thing. It was because they wanted to truly post it. So seeing again, just because your experience with one person is one thing doesn't mean that that same experience with that same person is going to be the same for someone else. So things do still happen differently. I get that, obviously, but that does make me feel at least a little bit better. Um, and again, there's still a lot of information that we aren't aware of. So there's still more information that could come out that could still, excuse me, continue to change things. But at least for now, just having it at that level is one thing. Of course, it did refer to her being aware of other inappropriate relationships, but that could just be inappropriate is kind of a vague word in my opinion. It could go from one extreme to the next. My inappropriate could be normal for someone else and vice versa. So it could be a simple affair that he was having, and obviously he's still married, so legally married, as unless something's changed, but not that I'm aware of. So that is technically inappropriate. You know what I mean? So it could be something in that nature, or it could be something to the other end of the spectrum, and to another extreme as things like this. So I'm not going to speculate on that until we get more information on that, and that's just kind of where I come from with stuff like that. I'm the type where I don't like to jump to conclusions. I like to know A through Z, sometimes to the fault. Um, so I'm not gonna sit there and be like, oh, she should have done A, B, C, and D without knowing the rest. So again, and it sucks too, and it puts everyone in a really shitty situation, in a really trying situation, and especially looking and noticing when Nick Khan was hired and when all of this truly started. It's interesting that he was brought in as a fix, or referred to rather as a fixer, with still being so fresh to the company and in that role. Um, so that was rather interesting to me. I would be very interested if we got any more clarification on that, or anything else. There's a rabbit hole that I'm trying not to go down right now. Um, but that whole timing and that statement of the fixer being one of his Vince McMahon's two fixers was very interesting. And again earlier I wasn't expecting the explicitness of the allegations when they reference what McMahon is alleged of doing. So I apologize for reading that. But it sometimes you just have to kind of say what it is, and that's what's allegedly to have happened. So you know, um, but yeah, I think with the revelations of the four officers, I just spoke with Stephanie. Nick Khan isn't really a surprise. Um, it is going to be interesting to see what happens going forward. But again, the article was specific, and Janelle Grant's lawyer confirmed that, in my opinion, at least, she confirmed by confirming their identities that nothing additional happened that they were aware of, and them being the four corporate officers. If they were aware of the specific nature of the alleged abuse that was happening, I don't think, or I think things would be much different, and I think they would have their own pending investigation as well. So I think we are okay with accepting and knowing that, okay, this is most likely the extent of the information that they knew. Again, it doesn't make it right. But again, it's still a sticky situation and still something that I think, well, I know there's more information too that we aren't privy to. So I'm not going to make judgments in that regard either. Because you just imagine being in any of those roles, right? If you're Nick Khan coming into a fresh company and you're reporting directly to this guy who's doing all the shady shit, and you're what do you like? Who do you go to? What do you do? What do you like? If you go to HR, okay, but HR is still underneath the individual that is allegedly doing all this stuff. So I think looking back on it, it's crazy because I was always concerned. Oh no, what like if WWE is sold to an outside source and not just passed down from Vince to Stephanie or Shane or to Triple H, what would happen to it? But in a way, I think it was probably for the best at this point, and that sounds really selfish, I'm sure. But in the business side of things and the wrestling side of things, this if it went under the McMahon ownership, I think it could be way worse, and I think the reputation and the business outlook, it would be quite different, and the deals would be quite different. But again, that's just my speculation. So in a weird way, I think the merging of WWE and UFC into TKO and everything in that regard was actually probably a blessing in disguise for a lot of different reasons. Um, and I think it's interesting too. Side note, I don't know the exact number, but I believe it was like 400, almost it was definitely over 400, closer probably to $500 million worth of shares that Vince sold recently. I believe within the last week or so, and it's just amazing to me that, and he still has a good percentage left. It's just amazing to me that he can, or anyone, just anyone for that matter, can be going through allegations of that nature, and you can say this for a couple different scenarios that are going on in our country, but you could be going through allegations and have a lot of pending investigations, but you're still allowed to do certain transactions and still allowed to profit and still allowed to do what you want essentially. So yes, he was most likely forced and highly suggested, to step down. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's probably that was probably an ego blow to him and not something that he wanted to do, obviously. But at the end of the day, like, it doesn't it's okay, he's doing what he wants to do now. And it still is kind of bizarre to wonder what Vince McMahon is doing right now, because anyone that you would have heard interviews from back in the day, they would say, "Oh, Vince is gonna die in the chair," like that. Wrestling is literally his life. Like, he sleeps for maybe an hour or two a night, and he's working in the gym after that. So it's just really kind of strange to think how everything has changed within the past few years and how the wrestling industry has changed, and in a lot of ways it makes you again thankful for AEW and just thankful for different key players that have come into role into power within the past 5 years alone, if you think about it. But I with that being said, I think that's all I'm gonna reference and kind of state right now. Like I said, there's still a ton more information that we need to obtain. And I didn't really speak on Brad Bloom and Brian Nurse, obviously, because I personally don't know much of them myself. So I can't speak to that nature. But um I think it's gonna be very interesting, like I said, but as we wrap up here, that or I think it's gonna be very interesting what the focus is going forward. And tying into real quick, there was an article, and I don't know the validity of it, or if any credible source confirmed it or anything like that. So I didn't even want to bring it up, but since I'm talking about this, it reminded me of it. There was a couple different headlines that were circulating. I believe it was yesterday or the day before, that WWE and creative is trying to work Brock Lesnar back into plans for WrestleMania 40. And if that's the case, I'd be very, very surprised by that. And I think to get my official opinion, I'm gonna wait and see if that does end up happening. Part of me is leaning towards no, and you really don't need him, especially I think it was most likely telling as well with the storyline and the direction that Gunther ended up taking, and how he's, Sami Zayn's most likely to be facing off against him or facing off against him at WrestleMania 40. So I think if they were trying to work Brock in, they would have left that a little bit more open ended. And yeah, they can still make changes or additions or anything like that. But I'm not if I had to put a bet on it and money on it, I would say most likely no to Brock at WrestleMania 40. But it was interesting that that was kind of floating around. And again, it could have just been baseless, so that's why I didn't even want to reference it. But again, just kind of speaking of the article here, it did make me think of the reports or that couple headlines that came out yesterday. But like I said, guys, again, frontofficesports.com is where I read the article and who did the reporting and who did the identification for the corporate officers. So shout out again to them for the work that they put into that. Again, it was John Pollock, Brandon Thurston, and Tim Markman. I hope I pronounced that correctly. But again, and like I said, also at the beginning, John Pollock, at least, and Brandon Thurston did do a video or an interview rather with on Law and Crime Network, I believe it was. So definitely check that out if you want to hear their thoughts and not just read them and or listen to me kind of ramble on here. But thank you guys. It's weird saying thank you for tuning into an episode like this, but in a lot of ways, I do thank you for tuning into an episode like this because I think it is important. In a lot of ways, it makes me feel kind of conflicted as a wrestling fan and as a human being and as a female with loving a sport, in my opinion, a sport and or just a business and a company and knowing the person who was responsible for it all is accused and alleged of doing all these things and just involving all these different people and all these in just what Janelle Grant allegedly went through. So it's a lot of ways I feel kind of dirty talking about it and like a traitor almost, which is very strange and to say because I feel on both sides. But I think it's a conversation that needs to be had. You know what I mean? And I think it's a conversation that more outlets should have and more people should be discussing and not just mocking and not just downplaying, because if everything or even just a fraction of what's alleged here is true, shame, like the shame for lack of other words on so many different levels. So again, with that being said, guys, again, I appreciate you guys for checking out the show, listening to me ramble about some things, go off on side tangents and deviate. But I appreciate you guys as always. Thank you for checking out the show either on YouTube, if you're listening to it on Apple or Spotify, whatever you do. I appreciate it. Tonight, again, it's March 13th. It is my day of birth, so I'm super excited about that. I got my free coffee this morning. I have some great people in my life, so I appreciate everyone who has reached out already. So I just wanted to say thank you if you're listening and or watching this. I am about to hop off here and be that person as I sit there and contemplate everything I know about myself and my fandom, and then hop on and play 2K24 for the PS4. Part of me is bummed because I tried to exchange it to play the Xbox version so I can hop on with a couple of friends, but since it's not cross-gen, which I should have known and done more research on. But if you got 2K24 and you're on PS4, holler at me. Reach out to me in the comments or on Twitter at ASHMANNS or at the show's Twitter page at Kickash Podcast _ feel free to reach out to me on there, or you can drop any comments here and I will try to get back to you. Again, if you know me in real life, I suck at social media. I am that person, so nothing personal. But thank you so much, guys. I hope you have an awesome day and stay safe.